right? And in her case, we might also see some sort of sexual acting out behavior going on. Things she normally wouldn't do, but under the influence, she's getting involved, and maybe really early sexualization happens as a result of lowering our inhibitions with the alcohol allows us to be sexual. And sometimes she's going to get mixed up with an older group of kids, say she's 13 or 14, hanging out with 17, 18-year-olds. And we'll see that kind of mix in there, and there might be some side effects there. But the main big ticket items here are probably what happens in work and school, and then this family trust thing. And we begin to obsess on the alcohol and drugs, and we're seeking to be comfortable 24/7. Okay. So eventually somebody thinks it might be a good idea that we do what? Stop. Okay? And so, okay, it's time that you stop drinking and using. This is when we'll see the interventions happen. You go to jail and your family decides this is a good time for you to go to rehab. All kinds of different things show up there. And maybe we go into a rehab or we go to an AA meeting or we just stop on our own. And let's say that she's 24 years old, these side effects have gotten bad enough, she gets a DUI, and she says, okay, that's it, I'm done drinking. And so she stops drinking, she stops using, and the sun comes out, and the bees start buzzing, and the birds are chirping, and the butterflies are flying, and it's a wonderful. Yes? No. Okay. Because what happens? What happens to these two? There's withdrawal symptoms, right? And then what happens here?
You deal with it. How those feelings come back.
Everything that we were trying to avoid comes back. So we're talking depression, anxiety, lonely, and remember that original trauma? And now we add this new one, or maybe not so new thing called shame because of all the mess that we've made in our addiction. So we've got our original trauma, our original feelings coming from that alcoholic family. Now we've got the second layer of our side effects, and we're going to take away our medication. Really interesting. These two go crazy. You can't stop thinking about getting loaded and how it used to be back in the day when it was working, and you're feeling very uncomfortable. So what's going to happen?
Relapse.
This is why there's about a 95% and above relapse rate with alcohol and drugs the first time you try and stop. Now she's trying to stop on her own. Who is she talking about these things with? Is she getting educated on the disease? Is she able to get some comfort from talking to other people, going to meetings? No. She's going to handle this on her own. And so we'll see the relapse. And the relapse is not always a negative thing because the person may come to the understanding that they need some help from the relapse. But she may show up in your office at this point. You're the therapist and somebody's recommended she come and see you for some counseling, okay, and you're going to start working with her. Maybe she's not going to tell you the extent that she was drinking and using, but you always have to say, okay, well, do you have any experience with alcohol, any experience with drugs, and start doing the interview to find out, is this an alcohol and drug related depression anxiety problem? Okay. Okay. So she was trying this chemical solution to the spiritual problem, and she comes to you for therapy, and you determine she probably has alcoholism, even though she came by it because she started self-medicating trauma. Okay, if you recommend Alcoholics Anonymous or some other kind of recovery program, a church-based program like Celebrate Recovery, for her to go to, a 12-step program, what does that do? When we're looking at this model, so she was trying a chemical solution to a spiritual problem. What does a 12-step recovery do?
Gives you the spiritual solution to your chemical problem.
Well, But it's originally that spiritual problem she had, right? So it's a spiritual solution to the spiritual problem. Now, is there tolerance and withdrawal when we're talking about using a spiritual solution versus a chemical solution? Or could this be a lifelong solution to her obsession and her dis-ease? Yeah. Now, when she was 14, could I have brought her, if I was a therapist seeing her at 14, saying, you know, you really need to have a spiritual program to begin to practice spiritually? Maybe. Some kids are going to grab onto that at that age, and if they're, you know, already in a church or some organization like that. But is it specifically going to address her trauma? Probably not. So as a therapist, we need to understand this. And she may have to go through her course of using alcohol and drugs and run that out till it stops working, get to the point where she has to get clean and sober, maybe go through a couple of relapses before she's willing to do what it takes to develop a spiritual problem, or a spiritual program to deal with a spiritual problem. Does that make sense? Okay. So when we're looking at this model, what do you think some of the side effects of actually working a spiritual program would be? What are we going to see show up here?
Encouragement.
Yeah. So she may feel encouraged.
Hope.
Yeah, a sense of hope.
Love for herself.
Yeah.
For himself.
And then self-love and self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the side effects there. And then we're looking at family trust over time. Okay? Is she going to be healthier?
Mm-hmm.
Is she going to gain wisdom? She's going to be a much wiser person. So we start looking at some of the side effects of being in a program. So if I'm a therapist or an alcohol and drug counselor and we propose to take away this person's medication, okay, you better have something to replace it with. And it better be something that works better and longer than medication. So in our case, sports, not a problem. So I recommend people exercise, a big, big part of recovery. Okay, I'm going to say 12-step meetings, but anything that works that has a spiritual base, and not a religious base, but a spiritual base. So anything that works to make that person feel better within their spirit, and when they're in a meeting, are they feeling a sense of ease? Yeah. They're hearing the solution, they're with other people like they are, they're expressing instead of depressing things. They're getting hope from watching other people stay sober, and they're with their people. This is where they feel at ease, and when they're in that meeting, hopefully it's helping them with their thinking. If they're really, really negative, are they now getting more positive coming out of that meeting? And I think meetings release dopamine. So you'll hear people laughing in there, and we really actually raise hell in there. It's like being at a party, so you get kind of a high or a dopamine release from it. So when I talk about spiritual, it's anything that helps that person's spirit feel whole or to heal the spirit. So it could be church, it could be reading the Bible, it could be Buddhism, it could be chanting, it could be meditating, taking a hike. Anything that works for people, listening to music, I would consider all of that a spiritual program. So some kind of spiritual practice. Now, when she started drinking and using, that was an extremely healthy gesture towards herself. Why would Counselor Steve say that? Don't be shy. What do you think?
Just trying to protect herself?
Well, she's treating herself. Self-medication, right? Now, you might send her to a psychiatrist and they give her Xanax because she's having panic attacks already, or an antidepressant, or a mood stabilizer. She found her own. And it worked really, really well. And so she's attempting to medicate or treat her spiritual issue, her thinking issue. So it's a healthy gesture, it just stops working. Like if weed still worked, I wouldn't be talking to you guys. I'd be at home hitting my pipe right now. And when I was 16 years old, I thought I would be 80, like in my rocking chair on my porch hitting my bong, right? Didn't work out that way because of tolerance, right? And the side effects were overwhelming. But in her case, she's found something that works. Well, as a therapist, am I actually going to intervene on that when it's working?
God, I hope not.
Is she going to be willing to give it up? Okay. And so we need to understand she's in the honeymoon phase or the early phase of addiction, and this is working really, really well. People won't adopt this until they've got nowhere else to go, and the drugs absolutely aren't working and most likely are killing them. This is the last house on the block, as we say. You don't, like in your first year of using, say, you know, I think I'll drop by an AA meeting just to see what they do in there. Maybe I have a problem, right? That's the last place you would ever go. And then our pride tells us I can do it on my own. So there's a lot of time in there when she's going to try and do it on her own. She might go to a few meetings but not do everything they tell her, like get a sponsor and work the steps. And you as a therapist might be attending her while she's going through this process. There might be several relapses. She might switch addictions into another behavior, into an old behavior. She might go back into her overeating, smoking too many cigarettes, drinking too many Monsters. This is all things you see at AA, by the way, right? And so you'll see the addiction kind of migrate into another behavior, but she's now incorporating some of these healthy behaviors in there with it. So it's not all bad. What are some other things that you would think of that you could put into the situation to deal with these two hits? So we've got 12-step meetings, spiritual practice, sports, exercise. What else would be really important to make a person actually feel healthy?
Maybe find healthier friends.
Okay. So some kind of a support group or positive group of friends. So maybe she's going to get into a hiking club or a club at college that doesn't include binge drinking. Yes.
Maybe like travel. Maybe this person needs to get
Okay.
away from their environment so there aren't any reminders.
Well, that could be called taking a geographic. In other words, trying to shield yourself from it. And maybe they need to do that in the beginning. But where are they going to live?
Back where they work.
Kind of. So some people advocate a rehab and getting well situation where you live. Other people, there's people from New Jersey that are in Newport Beach, that are heroin addicts from New Jersey. The family ships them out to Newport Beach because they just got to get them out of that town. Yes.
Yeah, a family member of mine actually took the room and repainted it and redecorated it and kind of started fresh like that.
Okay. Yeah, so what do we call that? Remodel.
Yeah.
Remodeling our life, right? Now in my case, in drug court, I would take the kids rock climbing. And I had a rock climbing program, and that works really, really well for addicts. Well, what do addicts need to feel? Some kind of jolt, right? And some kind of adrenaline producing sport. It's a dopamine producing sport. The person's going to feel a higher level of self-esteem. If they make a climb they didn't think they could, it gets them tired, but it releases that adrenaline and that dopamine. So it's working on that brain chemistry that we screwed up. Yes?
I think that's really great because addicts really focus on the little things. And I think when they're putting so much time and energy and mental, like when they focus so much on just like getting that next step on the rock climb,
Yeah.
I think that's like really cool.
Rock climbing is very meditative.
Yes.
So it helps them with their anxiety, it helps with depression, and it gets someone focused and present. It's what we call being mindful or present. And when you're rock climbing, especially outdoors, you can't think about anything about, is this rope gonna break? Am I gonna die? And I wanna get to the top so I can come down. You're just really focused in on this part of your world. Where's the next hold? And so rock climbing is really, really good. Taking them hiking. Take them down to Laguna Canyon, take them hiking, and talk to them as we're hiking. Get them out of the therapist, quote, office and out into nature. Maybe they've lived in Orange County all their life and never been in Laguna Canyon. Maybe they've never been to the ocean, right? So surfing for a lot of people is a big thing. Music is another big thing. Anything that you can find. Now as a therapist, sometimes we get caught up into trying to fix them. Well, we need to get you right back into junior college, we need to get you a job, we need to, and that's the kind of trying to avoid. This directly addresses the spiritual issue and what's going on in here. Therapy directly addresses what's going on in here. These other things are good as long as they're in combination with this. Someone had a hand up. Yes?
I'm not sure if this is appropriate or not, but, actually I'm not sure, but would it be appropriate during this time or any time to like have the courage to face the original trauma that caused you to get to this point? And I'm not sure if that's...
Great point.
I'm sorry?
A great point. So when do we actually go into trauma therapy? I would say the person would have to have at least a year of solid sobriety and a solid recovery program, whatever that looks like. But say they're in my 60-day rehab and this trauma that this little girl went through comes up in group, well, we're going to address it. I'm not just going to sweep it under the rug, but I also need to know this person has to be somewhat put together to be, especially when we're talking about sexual abuse or major trauma, major physical trauma, sexual abuse. Those things are going to take time, and it could cause enough stress. Remember, stress is a big relapse trigger for this person to go out and use. It's a real delicate kind of balance. But if maybe they can't get sober unless they talk about it. So as a therapist, we're going to have to make that judgment call. Yes?
And just to clarify, going back to travel, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I would say travel, but not like
Not
moving
forever.
to try and avoid what we call taking a geographic. Because everywhere we go, who's there with us? Here I am again, right? So we're trying to like run away from ourselves, and it's not a positive. But say I'm going to go to Yosemite for a week, very positive.
Okay.
Something like that. But generally, these people that come out to rehab out here in California, some of them stay. They don't want to go back to New Jersey, New York, the East Coast, because they know it's just, they'll use. And they're heroin addicts, generally heroin addicts. And so that, I would say, is a positive thing. They just relocate out here. And they built their recovery fellowship out here, and it seems to be working for them. So it's kind of a, are you running away, or do you definitely can't go back there? Maybe dealers, you owe them money or they owe you money. Maybe, you're wanted back there. That a lot of people come out here with warrants. They come with them. All that wreckage kind of comes with you. So if I'm going to chop this head off and stop drinking and using, I have to replace it with something positive, whatever it is, or a combination of things. And all I can hope to do with these two is maintain. So this is a lifelong process for a lot of people that are alcoholics and drug addicts. It is a lifelong process of maintenance of their thinking and their feelings. These are the two things that cause that stress that can take us out. Well, what's it like in here once I have a recovery program going? So say I'm 5 years into recovery, I've been through some therapy, I've dealt a little bit with the trauma. What's it going to be like in here? What do you think? Real. But now with all this support, I can handle real. And it's going to be like this. You're going to have the full range of emotions start to happen, right? And so this is why people stay in programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous for their whole life. And it keeps them level and so they don't go back and think about this chemical solution. Remember in the film, this is trapped in the brain, that this is 3 gumballs. So you could be 10, 20 years sober, and you get stressed with a life event, and your brain will remember that chemical solution. But now you've had enough program and recovery in your head that you may think about using, but you call somebody. You make that phone call, or you go to a meeting, or you do your meditation and prayer, whatever the thing is. And so the longer you're in sobriety, the more likely you're going to turn to a recovery behavior. But early sobriety, the more likely we're going to want to turn back to the chemical. Does that make sense? Yeah, it takes a while to condition the mind and the body and the brain to choose a recovery behavior over a chemical fix. So, but this will always be there, kind of lurking around that, hey, this worked at one point. And our brain remembers pleasurable experiences. Remember? I think it's the glutamate. Was it the glutamate neurochemical? That's the memory neurochemical. And so that's still kind of alive. And so a lot of addicts believe they've got a little bit of a pilot light flickering in here. All they need to do is add some gas, being the alcohol or the drug, and then they've got another big flame up. And so that's, a lot of people have had that experience. Any questions or comments about the model? Yes?
When you say for sports and exercise, it helps, you have to replace it, right? Can you be addicted to exercise to a point where it's unhealthy?
So again, that addictive energy will migrate into even a healthy behavior. So I could become so obsessive about my diet that it's like being an addict to, supplements and this, that, and the other thing. But I'll see people get addicted to exercise in AA. One guy I know, he tried to run a marathon on OxyContin. He was like in the porta potty doing oxy, snorting oxys in the middle of a marathon and couldn't finish it. So he got sober and he got into triathlons. And so now he's doing marathons and triathlons. Now he's got a strong program going here, but he's also totally addicted to this. So people that do ultra marathons, more than the 26.2, they're doing 50 mile, 75 mile, 100 mile in the Swiss Alps, or they're running across Death Valley. Have you guys heard about that race where they run across Death Valley? It's some god-awful race. They can't get enough of the rush, the runner's high, the endorphin high. It's just not enough, and they're addicts, So yeah, you'll see it translate into that. Or somebody will just try and be really, really good, and they'll go about getting college degrees. They'll become drug counselors. Then they need a master's degree, they need another master's degree, and then they need a PhD, right? And you'll see people start trying to make themselves okay out here. Again, I'm using something out here so I can finally feel okay. And they're kind of out of balance. Yeah, so a really good point. Anything else that comes up? Can anybody see this model where it's useful in a rehab or a therapy setting? Yeah. Does it kind of make sense what's going on with the disease? And where this came from was when I went through rehab in '81, we had a family week. Well, my mom and my dad and my 4 brothers showed up. They didn't bring the dog, thank God, because I got him high. Poor old Scotch, the collie. Right? Here, buddy, try this. But anyway, they show up to this rehab, and my mom at that point was 15 years sober, quote sober. And she had never been to Alcoholics Anonymous, never been to a therapist, never talked to anybody. She had a spiritual experience and was struck sober September 4th, 1966. And she quit smoking cigarettes and drinking the same day. Well, she came to this family week, and they showed a film called The Three-Headed Dragon. Well, I cannot draw, especially not a dragon. So now it's a three-headed monster. And my mom saw this film, and she's watching this film, and she started crying. And I go, what's wrong? And she goes, I'm a dry alcoholic. She's an untreated alcoholic, and she realized that she was still just as sick in those areas as when she had stopped drinking. She had not treated the spiritual dis-ease whatsoever. And she was really suffering. And so she got for herself that she needed to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and she started her AA program at that point. Then she became a drug and alcohol counselor. But she realized that these two were way out of control for her, and that she needed treatment, and she finally allowed herself to get treatment. Before that, she was so ashamed that she never wanted to talk to anybody or let anybody know what had happened. And so that Three-Headed Dragon film really broke a lot loose for her. So it works really well, and again, it's not scientific, but we do talk a little bit about that midbrain, the brain disease. The thinking, what we call the thinking disease, the thinking part of it, and then the spiritual disease. Isn't this what we're all shooting for in our lives? So this isn't just addicts or alcoholics, this is most people. And in your 10-day journal, you should be feeling some dis-ease if you've stopped your behavior, and most likely you've relapsed. How many people have relapsed so far? Okay, there's still a few strong ones out there, right? Yeah, not easy. Not easy, right? And so we need to understand that these are the two that have to be treated if we're going to maintain the physical sobriety. Okay, well, thank you guys all for coming. Thank you, Mr. Dolan.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we'll see you all Thursday. And AA papers over there.
Look at his head, it's so shiny, it's majestic. It's like a big pink jewel.